Thank you very much, Kurt, and thank you to all of you who are here for this great step as we inaugurate the efforts of this wonderful commission and the celebration of what will be a national event right here in St. Augustine. I want to welcome all of you here to this meeting, and I want to also say that this commission has a lot of work ahead of it, but it has a lot to build on. It has 450, in fact 500 years of history here in Florida that it can work on to make sure that the story of Florida and the contributions that the people here in St. Augustine have made are known to the nation and are known to the world. To all of you, the citizens of St. Augustine, and all of you who care so much about this very special place, it is a very special place, and you live in one of our Creator's most special places. And that history which you carry in your hearts and the history that you celebrate here in St. Augustine is one which is a very special one which I hope you continue to celebrate in the way that this commission will help chart that course over the next several years. I want to just say a quick word about why, for me, this is so important. As Secretary of the Interior, I have a great opportunity on behalf of this nation to oversee the natural resources of this country and the cultural resources as well. Senator Danny Inouye often refers to this job as the best job in the cabinet because he says you are the custodian of America's natural resources and the custodian of America's heritage. And you can see that just in the way that I get to travel, the great places that I get to see. When I am, as I was yesterday, in the crown of the continent in Montana, at places like Swan Valley and the Blackfoot Valley and the Rocky Mountain Front and Glacier National Park, and a few days before that in the wildlife refuges in the state of Wisconsin, and a few days after that being in places like, or before that being in places like San Antonio, where we celebrated the missions in San Antonio and the Great River Walk and the River Restoration Place. So I have a great job. And so when I meet with my cabinet counterparts, Secretary LaHood, for example, I tell him, you know, you get to go and celebrate bridges and roads and things like that. I get to go and celebrate Yosemite and Acadia and the Everglades. And so I do indeed have, I believe, what is the most wonderful job in the cabinet on behalf of this nation. So I thank you all for coming here to St. Augustine as we inaugurate the special effort of the commission. I want to make just a quick comment about Florida because this is an agenda which Senator Bill Nelson and I have worked on for a long time. It goes beyond St. Augustine, but the tourism and the economy obviously have been a struggle here for the last several years, but we have tried to move forward in a way that hopefully will restore this economy to the greatness that we need to make it happen. And we know that the times have been rough over the last several years. We know that when you look back at the history of this country, that never since the Great Depression have Americans lived through such an unsettled time economically. But yet here in Florida, initiatives which I have spent a huge amount of time working on with Senator Nelson and then Governor Chris at the time was moving forward with the Everglades National Park and Preserve. We have a World Heritage Site here in the Everglades. And we know that the investments that we make in the Everglades and the restoration of the river grass is something which is important as we restore, if you will, one of the Creator's most important places on this earth. When you think about the fact that the Everglades is a World Heritage Site and the restoration efforts that we have underway over the last several years are now restoring the flows of water into that river of grass, it's something which we should all be proud of here in Florida and all across the country. So when we started building the Tamiami Trail and started getting the flows of grass back, it was something that was important for the heritage of our planet, but it was also something which we recognize is important to the economy of Florida, because without the water quality that comes from those Everglades and those rivers, frankly, the economy of southern Florida will wither. So we are pushing forward with that major initiative, and as Senator Nelson often calls me and reminds me about, that we need to continue to put our shoulder behind that effort to make it continue to happen because it's so important to the future economy of Florida. And so on that one, Congressman Micah, we're going to need your help because ultimately some of these things cost money. and you think about the major investments that we made in the Everglades, the Tamiami Trail and transportation issues and bill, which you are so involved in the House of Representatives, we need to make sure that we get that one done. Fast forward up here to the north. When I look at a place like St. Augustine, as I drove in last night, I thought, what a jewel for not only St. Augustine, but for the state of Florida, for the nation, and for the world. A jewel that tells the story of the founding of America with the first continuous settlement of the United States of America. A story that tells the history of Ponce de Leon and the history of Pedro Menendez de Avilas, the history of Father Carlos, and all that happened back in those days, which basically created much of the blueprint that we now know as America. And yet, as I was there last night in a quick visit to the chapel and at the museum with Eric Johnson, we were talking about the fact that the history of this place may be well known to all of you here at St. Augustine, may be well known to people who are history buffs, to people like Michael Gannon, who has written so eloquently about this place, but it's not a history that really is very well known throughout the United States. Eric was telling me last night that as he went to school, that he was always being taught how Plymouth Rock and Jamestown were the first places that were settled in this country. And as a young man, he would tell his teacher that that was not in fact the case. That there were places here in Florida that actually predated Jamestown and Plymouth Rock by nearly half a century. So by the time, they say, by the time Jamestown and Plymouth Rock came along, we're already doing an urban renewal here in Florida at St. Augustine. And so that history is a history that is important to tell. And I always put it in this context. We as a nation have been the beacon for the world in terms of the progress of humanity. The arc of justice, as Dr. Martin Luther King would say, bends towards the kind of moral universe that creates a more perfect humanity. But we have a history in this country, which is an important history that tells that story of that arc bending in the correct way. This is important for us as we move forward to create an even more perfect union that we tell the story of St. Augustine. I also will submit to you that as we look at this kind of an agenda, that we ought not ever to forget the economics that come along with the efforts of tourism and with outdoor recreation. So for me, as the Secretary of Interior, I work very hard with Jay, who is a member of our National Parks Foundation, and with so many other people, to make sure that people understand the economic contributions that we make to the tourism efforts here in the United States. We estimate that from outdoor recreation alone, there are some 6.5 million jobs that are created here in the United States of America. We estimate that over $700 billion are added to the economy from great places like St. Augustine's national parks unit that we have here under the leadership of Gordy Wilson. And so as we struggle with the economic crisis of our time, we ought not to forget that we need to continue to investing in the conservation agenda. I'm not here to give a speech about what's happening in Washington, D.C., but I will only note that when you look at the cuts and the 22% draconian cuts that have been made within the House of Representatives in the appropriations bill, which has been passed out of the Appropriations Committee, it will set back our efforts significantly to conserve the special wildlife refuges and national parks places and the whole rest of the conservation agenda. So I would ask all of you, the citizens here and the leaders of the Congress who are here, to not forget the nexus that exists between our investments in conservation and preservation and the job creation agenda, which is so important to all of America. Let me finally say that we are here in St. Augustine in large part because of your mayor. Without Mayor Bowles coming into my office and telling me that we needed to do something to celebrate the 450th anniversary of the oldest continuous settlement in North America, we would not be here today. And it was his advocacy, along with the local leadership here, along with that of Senator Bill Nilsson that has me here today. And it is why Gordy Nilsson and the rest of the National Park Service will be here working with you hand in hand as we celebrate not only the 450th anniversary of St. Augustine, but we also celebrate the quincentennial of the landing of Ponce de Leon. So it will be a wonderful several years ahead of us as we work on this agenda. Now, for all of you who are here, I will just relay a final personal story before I have the honor of introducing Senator Bill Nilsson. For me, when I was growing up in a place far away from Florida, it's a small and very rural area in the very southern part of Colorado, not small geographically, small in terms of the number of people, about 265 miles south of the city of Denver, Colorado's capital. It's a very poor place. In fact, the counties of Conejos and Costilla County and the San Luis Valley are two of the four poorest counties in the United States of America. And most people, as I was growing up, probably would not have thought that I would ever have the honor to serve my country, first as the Attorney General of my state, and then later as a United States Senator, and now as a member of the President's Cabinet, and seventh in line to the presidency of the United States. And they probably would not have thought that, because when they would go out to our place in a ranch that is known as Los Rincones, which has been there forever, they would see a father and mother with 8 children. All 8 of those children spoke only Spanish in the household. They didn't speak any English because that was the language of our home. It was the language of our home. It was also the history of my family, because my family helped found the city of Holy Faith, the city of Santa Fe, New Mexico, the city that really, I thought at the time, was the oldest city in America. It's only that Father Willis and others have taught me different things since then. But it was interesting, as I was growing up in that place in the San Luis Valley, that I was also being taught in our public schools the same story that Eric Johnson was being taught here in Florida at the time, and that is that our history was really one that came from further north, and the history and the contributions that had been made by the Spanish and by those colonial pioneers was not one that was ever taught in our schools. I was taught, for example, that my forefathers had come across on the Mayflower and had landed in Plymouth Rock, and somehow that did not seem to square up with what I was learning at home. And so telling the story of America in all of its completeness is a very important initiative for me as Secretary of Interior. If you are a woman in these United States of America, it is important to know that the struggle for equality for women really has taken place in the crucible of this democracy that we call the United States of America. And yes, someday we will see a woman as President of the United States, but it will happen here. When we think about the history of African Americans and the history of Fort Monroe, where the first African American was born here in the United States, as they were taken as property from Africa and landed into this place in Virginia, it was there where the first slave gave birth to the first African American that we know. That's a history that is important for all of us to know. The history of the Civil War, the history of what happened in the early 1900s. And that's part of the mosaic that you do so well here in St. Augustine. You tell a part of that story. Now, it's important to tell that story because it is, in my view, a march of a country which is really the beacon of the world in terms of its freedom and its democracy. It's why we are the envy of the world and have been for so long. And so telling the stories of America, as you do here in St. Augustine, are incredibly, incredibly important. Let me, with that, then introduce Senator Bill Nilsson. I came to the United States Senate from Colorado and had the honor of serving with both Senator Bill Nilsson and with Senator Mel Martinez. And we worked on some very tough issues. There were issues relating to energy, relating to immigration, relating to a whole host of other things. But I have never seen a greater champion for Florida than Bill Nilsson. He does not hesitate to call me or any of the other cabinet members or the President of the United States and put us on the carpet and tell us, you got to do it right, and you got to do this for doesn't matter whether it's the Everglades dealing with some tough issues there in terms of investments in the Tamiami Trail, or in dealing with those invasive Burmese pythons, which we all want to kill down in the Everglades. He calls me and he tells me, you have to do this because it's right for the state of Florida. He is a tireless worker on behalf of the people of the state. He is a highly respected member of the United States Senate, and I could not be prouder of having served and having the opportunity to call somebody a colleague and a friend, the near United States Senator Bill Nelson.